Okay, today it is December 17th, 2022. Charles Morris and I are here with Maik Meyer of Germany to interview him about his involvement with comets over his lifetime and a few interesting things about Mike's background. He was born in 1970 in East Germany. He's been observing comets visually since 1987, more than 160 comets. He's interested in celestial mechanics, orbital mechanics of comets, the history of cometary astronomy. He has a group of sun-grazing, sun-skirting comets named for him, the Meyer Group, and also found Comet 312P. He's a well-known author of comets, and he's married with 3 kids. He has a minor planet named for him, which is 52005 Mike. So welcome, Maik Meyer. It's nice to have you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
So we were expecting our fellow team member Carl Hergenrother to join us. He's not here at this moment. He may join us later in the interview. So, Charles, why don't you lead off with the questioning?
Okay, Mike, how do you get interested in comets?
Well, the direct date I cannot really recall, but I know as a teenager and even as a kid I was quite interested in sci-fi stories, yeah, and even as a kid normally sci-fi TV series, Star Trek for instance, yeah, and in East Germany it was also usual to have astronomy even in school and as a subject in 10th grade, and so yeah, for me it was quite a thing to try out something in astronomy, and what I always wanted is to do something which is valuable scientifically, or to have a contribution which may be of some real sense. And I tried. I had no telescope at that time. I just had a small pair of binoculars. And I was looking for something, and as you do it usually, you're looking in the literature. What can I do? Where can I contribute? What is a thing which would suit me? And yeah, in the end, it was either the sun or variable stars or comets, which were the things which could be done easily with binoculars. And well, and then suddenly, at the end of 1987, the local newspaper carried a small bit about a comet which was visible in the evening sky, conveniently placed. And of course it was a newspaper article. I cannot recall what was really written in there, but it said something in the evening sky. And what I did, I tried it. I went outside and took my binoculars and searched for it. And I guess it didn't carry any coordinates or something, but I found it. I saw it, and it was a nice comet. It even had a tail, and yeah, it was quite impressive. It was, you know, when you first see a comet, and even with a tail like a textbook comet. Yeah, this was 1987S as it was called back then, and 1987 Pre-1 as it now, one of the Bradfield comets. Yeah. And yeah, this was my first comet, and it will always have a special place for me, and that's it. I stick to it. I never went away. I tried this a few years observing variables besides comets, but in the end, it was comets only then.
Okay, so I see that Carl is going to join us momentarily. So, Mike, how did you get started in searching old photographic plates for comets and archival CCD images, and what pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, one thing is my observing location, because I live in Central Europe, and weather is, I think, something which is not very reliable here. And yeah, you can have few months even without any clear skies. So you have quite big times where you can't do really observing. And yeah, and I had always an interest in orbits. Might talk about this a little bit later. And yeah, there was a time, I guess, I don't remember exactly. I guess it was somewhere in the mid-90s or the end of the 90s where I saw the first minor planet circulars, or the IAU circulars, where pre-discovery or pre-covery observations were announced. One name comes to mind, Rainer Stoss, which was a fellow German guy who did a lot of pre-covery work back then. And yeah, you know, as it is, there's also an astronomy community here. So I contacted him and I tried to learn from him, and he was quite helpful. Yeah, and this was the beginning. It was quite exciting, really, to look in the archive for possible earlier sightings of a known object. And you know, it was a time when the internet and the tools was not as developed as they might be now, but there was a tool introduced back then which was called SkyMorph. And SkyMorph was nice because you just input orbital elements, and it would check for the NEAT archive, so the NEAT survey archives, but also the Digital Sky Survey archives, and a few others. So this was very convenient. So I would just calculate different orbits or possible orbits. You know, everybody who's doing a little bit with the orbital mechanics know that if you have a very short arc, you might do different ones, and due to perturbations it can change. So yeah, but it helped, and quite quickly I had some success, and so it went step by step. In the end, you learn more. You have a first success. You have many failures, but yeah, and this was quite an exciting time. I did quite a few precoveries back then, and even some fancy ones like trans-Neptunian objects, which were you know, it was a big deal then just to look at the NEO confirmation page, look for new bright objects, then use find orb as a orbital calculation tool, and try to check if to find some earlier images. So yeah, that was the thing that back then, and then later on I tried to refine it. So yeah, that you don't rely on online tools or on orbits. You try to calculate your own orbits just to make sure that nothing went wrong. If I was not sure, I was trying to ask other experts, Brian Marston, Shuichi Nakano. Yeah, so yeah, that was it in the end. Yeah. So in the end, you can say it was the bad weather which pushed me a little bit in this direction.
Yes, German weather, huh?
Yeah. So I think currently this is also due to work, but I haven't seen a comet since 3 months or so. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So Carl has joined us, Carl Hergenrother. Hi, Carl.
Hey, everyone. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Carl.
Fun meeting you. Yeah, sorry, I had internet issues. So one of the things you mentioned, of course, was looking through the old Palomar Sky Survey, at least the digitized archives online. And a lot of your early pre-discoveries were on there. Do you think there's still a lot of information still left on those Palomar Sky Survey? Is there still comets to be found, either pre-discovery or even comets that were just missed? And do you think it would be a worthwhile effort for others to maybe go back and look through that survey for other comets?
I'm pretty sure there are still comets buried there, but I'm also pretty sure they are not obvious comets. So mostly they might look like just trails, like a minor planet trail. Yeah, for instance, when I did the link of the 1987 comet quite recently, which was reported back then by Rob McNaught, and which was quite a cometary trail. I found a second one, I think 2 months later or so, and this was, well, the quality of the plate was not very good, but it looked clearly, or it looked just stellar. So I think, was it in the 70s or in the 80s? I'm not sure, but some Austrian scientists did quite a intense check of the first digital sky survey. Weinberger, Arno Dengel, I think was their name. So I don't know what about the second digital sky survey, but I don't think that you will have a good success. I guess there will be findings and identifications in the future, but probably with more asteroidal trails. Yeah.
Okay, Mike. You may know that I have a particular interest in methodologies of comet magnitudes. Do you have a preferred software for the reduction of CCD comet magnitudes?
No, I have to say, when it comes to comet magnitudes, it's relates more to my visual observing. When I do precovery or some archival work, the main point is the astrometry, just to secure a good link. I'm using usually Astrometrica for the reduction and for the measurement, and of course I also try to derive a magnitude, which is not often not very easy, even the measurement of the position, because you have a trailed image, for instance, or an image which is of very bad quality. It's very hard to determine a reliable magnitude. So I would say what I do usually, I just take the same catalog which I'm using for the reduction of the astrometry, and I guess the magnitudes are good to maybe 1 magnitude. It's really not my main point here. So it's just astrometry and not so much the.
So Mike, you've also been looking a lot at old comets prior to the photographic era, going way back centuries. What stands out to you the most in your work with historical comets in records before the photographic era, and why?
Okay, so yeah, I guess the biggest one is, of course, the finding of the identification of 12P Pons Brooks with the comets of 1385 and 1457, simply because it's really a well-known helitype comet, and I think for me it was quite a big deal. I may say something about it a little bit later on, but also also published a paper quite recently about 58 P1, which is also a medieval comet, where I found some. Yeah, it was not unknown, but where I found additional observations and which I then connected with some Chinese observations to really improve the orbit, which is quite different to the orbits which were published before. So I guess I would say when we talk about the pre-photographic era, these are quite the biggest one. But I have to say, I have a few other candidates in my drawer, which which are not very clear or very unambiguously that I really can say something about it or even publish it. And this is the point where I have to talk to others, especially, for instance, Chinese colleagues or friends who then retranslate the original sources again. just to be sure that something that is published in literature is really correct, and and so on. Another one which I might mention is that in July next year, I will have a book out which will cover unconfirmed comets between 1600 and 1899. And there are a few objects. They are mostly known because they are taken, of course, from literature, where we have found quite some new information, and we have even found some information about a comet which was deemed as lost. We really found letters detailing observations, which allowed it really to calculate an orbit. So, but I don't want to say much about it. So, but that's one thing I'm very excited about, and it shows that even in the pre-photographic era. So speaking generally of archival work, you can still find a lot of things, and of course the internet and archiving with scanning helps a lot. In the early days, you would need to travel worldwide, go to the libraries and so on. Nowadays, it's much more easier. So. So there are quite a lot, but in the end, to wrap it up, it's 12P definitely, yeah.
So speaking of 12P, I mean, it's coming back to perihelion in 2024. You know, it's on a roughly 70-year orbit, and of course, you just linked it up with 2 comets observed back in the kind of Renaissance era time frame. You mentioned you might want to say a little more about it, so here's your opportunity. Talk a little bit about the challenges and triumphs, or some of the maybe eureka moments for linking up Pons Brooks with previous apparitions.
To be honest, I'm astonished that it wasn't found earlier, because it was sitting right in front of a face. It was so easy in the end. What I did was a little bit of distraction from my usual writing work currently, and what I do, just to tell you, when I'm looking for old apparitions of comets, when a comet is being observed for the second time, rediscovered, I usually calculate a new orbit and do a backwards integration for about 200 years. If it makes sense or not, it doesn't matter. I just do it, and I have then a set of orbits for the earlier apparitions. I then put it in my piece of software, which then shows me in a planetarium program for a given time where the comet was. And I did it back then 2 years ago. I think I did it with 12P, really not thinking about that it would bring something. It was just to completing my orbital database. And then I was checking back at the dates when the comet was presumed to have its earlier apparitions, and I was quite astonished to see that it was at perihelion in 4057, and that it was really on spot in a few degrees away from the 4057 comet. And I said, oh, well, good. Let's check it later. I did the next apparition, 3085, and there was the comet from 3085, the Chinese comet there. And I couldn't believe it, because it was sitting right before us. I can only suspect with the new tools nobody has checked before. I also have to say the 1385 comet was not known before the Chinese observations were really published in Central Europe, which was just, I guess, 150 years or 120 years ago. So but this was quite exciting, and I was quite sure that it was too much of a coincidence. So it was the direction of movement was fitting. It was only just an adjustment of a few days in the perihelion times for those comets just to match. The exciting thing then was, it was quite clear for me to write something about it, was and it grew quite a lot from a short article, maybe short paper, to a bigger one. And because I was trying to check earlier apparitions, could it be that there's an even earlier apparition where it might be found? And yeah, this involved a lot of digging into literature. And this was quite exciting because I even found a few mentions of the 1385 comet, which weren't known before or weren't published before. I was lucky. I was contacting also Ryuichi Nakano, which he's quite helpful, trying to confirm my ideas or suggestions. And I was quite lucky that Takao Kobayashi had quite recently re-reduced all the observations of 12P from the known apparitions, which was quite a lucky coincidence because we now had also quite good astrometry to do the linkage. Yeah, so in the end, there were not so much things where I was unlucky about it. It was all in all was the only thing I might be a little bit unlucky is that the next apparition is not really a favorable, not very favorable. Yeah, you know, it's
Right.
it would be nice to have it better circumstances to see the comet, but yeah, but again, if somebody says, "Oh, well, it's great that you found it, that you identified it," really was sitting right in front of our nose. I was just lucky at that day to check it. Yeah.
It started in the collection of historic comet prints and books. What are some of your favorites, and which of these comets do you wish you had witnessed in person?
I really can't recall exactly when it started. If you are interested in old comets, comet history, and so on, I think you're always very fascinated by old depictions of comets in old engravings or woodcuts or whatever, because it a little bit transports the feeling and the views of the people at that time, how they viewed the comet. Yeah, and I always found it very, very exciting and very fascinating to look at those images. And yeah, and I don't know which was my first print, but I guess it started a little bit again with the internet. You love it or hate it, but yeah, you had much earlier access to it, and it might also be we. I have this catalog of comet discoveries, and for this I went back into libraries and also into used bookshops. And we have a quite big one in Leipzig. And it was back then my aim to collect all the old issues of the Astronomische Nachrichten, because they carried, of course, a lot of data, original discovery data, and I wanted to have it in my catalog to have the correct data, or just to double check that it's correct. And if you go into an old library and or even a bookshop and you look at all those books and fascinating old science books with the engravings and so on, it's very fascinating, and you really sit there and say, oh, if I would have the money to buy all this and put it on my shelf. It's not very reasonable to think this way, but yeah. So and this was the start, and
Wait, how many volumes of the AN do you have?
Not so much, because it was quite expensive at the time. I was a student, so not much money I had. And I have to say, it was a time when the first volumes became available online back then, which made it quite pointless to collect them, only if I would have a lot of money to spare. Yeah. So I think I had 10 volumes or so. I don't even have them anymore because it doesn't. But what I wanted to have was really some depictions, images, and it started with some images from the Theatrum Europaeum, which was some kind of history work from Europe, which had quite a few comets depicted there. The comet Kirch of 1680, for instance. Yeah, and then it went on, and yeah, there were two, because you were asking if there are some which are my favorites. There are two areas which I'm very fascinated about. One is the Lubinetsky work. I just now forgot the name. And the other one is the depictions of comets from the memoirs of the French publication. The let me have a look. Quite forgot the
Connaissance d'attente or Pangray?
From the Histoire de l'Académie Royale des Sciences. I don't know if I've spelled it correctly, the Histoire, and the other is the Theatrum Cometicum from Lubinetsky. They are a few centuries apart, but they are quite similar in a way, because both tried to depict comets a little bit in a aesthetical way, nice to look at, yeah. So, but also in a kind of scientific way, because you had the constellations printed. You have even a grid printed with the coordinates and so on. And you have they have tried to show the tail and so on. So they are apart maybe 2 or 3 centuries, but they're quite similar. But it's a different time, and from the art is it's quite different. But both are quite fascinating, I don't have a full collection of it, because it's hard to obtain those, and in the end there's money you have to spend on it, and I have a family, and sometimes
getting a copy of Lubinetsky is not cheap. And
I know.
The interesting thing, it's interesting that you bring that up. So Lubinetsky and Hevelius both worked on gigantic, amazing comet catalogs, apparently at the same time, and apparently not knowing that each other was doing so. And they're both heavily illustrated, and they both came out, I believe, around 1661 or thereabouts. And Lubinetsky's drawings are much more, shall we say, realistic looking. And I've wondered if he had access to manuscript collections where people made drawings and he would then copy them. It's hard to know how much actually came from actual illustrations versus how much he imagined how they would look from the written description. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's not only this, because when you look in the literature for old depictions, or even when you mention old catalogs, you come across very funny things. For instance, there's a German publication, I think 1500 something, which is also a comet catalog, but it's written in verses. Yeah, it's like a big song telling you about the comets seen in history. So it's very, very funny things sometimes, and very strange thing how people, and it was a big deal at a certain time to have comet catalogs. That there were quite a lot back then, and when Pingré came out with a big one, he was also using these old ones to in his catalog. So
he was about a century later, around in the 1780s, Pingré in Paris, and And yeah, it was natural to use catalogs that people had compiled before them, but then also they had access to these old European libraries where they would go in and actually look at the original books and manuscripts.
This is something I always wonder about, because in that time you had no telephone, you had no internet, but somehow he managed to collect all those data. I wonder how he did it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And of course, at that time, you were limited, even with the largest libraries in Europe, you were limited as to just how many things you could actually access, right? You say if you were in Paris, you had all the French publications, probably most of the German ones, maybe half of the Italian ones, but as you said earlier, much harder getting Chinese observations, other data on comets from the Far East. And so that brings us up to today. Gary Kronk started his cometography a couple of decades ago and has published a bunch of volumes. And you've gotten involved with him in that. And could you tell us a little bit about your involvement with Gary Kronk?
Yeah, I guess I helped him a little bit already with the volumes 3 and 4. I apparently had already a name in the area, and I had the mailing list, and he asked me when it came to translating German publications, also obtaining some German publications from libraries here, which I did. I also did some translation from Russian, which, when you are born in East Germany, you were required to learn Russian back then. So I have still some rudimentary knowledge there. Yeah, and then for volumes 5 and 6, he asked me if I would co-author, which I then did. Yeah, and and I already mentioned this. We have now another project running which deals with the so-called unconfirmed comets, or comets that weren't really possible to confirm. Was it a comet? Wasn't it a comet? Which I'm quite excited about, because we don't claim that we have found out so many new things, but we have tried to put those objects a little bit in perspective with the observer, and sometimes we have funny occasions where we can clearly say it was fabricated. Yeah, so it will be quite interesting. It will be quite different to the cometography things, which was quite really a listing of observations and data. So the next one will be more funny or more fun to read, because there are some interesting stories involved. Yeah, and we seem to work quite good together. So we plan another project even after that. So yeah. So usually we have some kind of data exchange server, and we send us over different things discussed, like we do here in this Skype meeting, also via Skype, when it comes to very problematic things. Yeah, and yeah, that was how I got involved with it. Yeah, and how I came into writing. Yeah, funny thing is, back in the 90s or so, when I had internet access, I had always the dream to write a book about comet hunting, because every teenager who starts observing, or especially comet observing, dreams of discovering their own comet. And when I think back, I started in 1987. Yeah, this was quite still a time where it would have been possible quite easily, given the weather is good, of course. And I once wrote to him and I said, Mr. Kronk, what would you think about a book project I intend to write about the cultural history of comet hunting? And it was very formal about it. At that time, I didn't think about that I would co-author one of his books then. Yeah. I never came to write this book, to be honest. Maybe it's still, but because I think comet hunting is especially visual comet hunting is something which is very fascinating, and there are a lot of interesting stories to tell. Then you know this, Charles, you all know this, all the funny stories connected with comet discoveries. That's quite fascinating, and I think it would be a good book to put all those stories together, to have it in one place. But yeah, maybe.
So speaking of comet hunting, I mean, you've in the past used the most prolific comet discovery telescope in history, and ironically one of the smallest comet discovery telescopes, which is the LASCO coronagraph instrument on SOHO. And while none of those comets bear your name, because everything discovered with the spacecraft is named after the spacecraft, you do have a comet group named after you, the sun-skirting Meyer group. Can you tell us a little more about finding those?
Also exciting times back then. And I wasn't the first, again, also here. In the end of the 1990s, there came the first IAU circulars out with comets found in the SOHO images. Terry Lovejoy, I think, was one of the first. John Shanklin, I think, was one also jumped in it. And yeah, and it was a time I was back then working at an university. I was not a student anymore, but we had quite good internet connection, which was quite important for such work. And yeah, and once you knew what to do, where to look for the new images, it was just you needed patience, you needed a lot of time, and you need a good internet connection. And and then quite quickly I found my first SOHO comet, and for I guess a period of 2 or 3 years or so, I was looking for these small little comets, and in the end, to be honest, it was more a technical race instead that the excitement was so much, because it was really being the first. So downloading not the processed images, you started to download the raw images and processed it on your own, because the processing on the SOHO LASCO side was a little bit slower, and so on. And at some point I stopped, to be honest, also because I was no longer working at the university, and I got a job and so on. But at that time, it's all connected somehow with orbits and history and so on. And it was quite clear that not all comets were members of the Kreutz group. Yeah, so a few of those comets were sporadic ones, if I can say it that way, and there were a few pairs, which showed quite similar orbital elements, and it was again such a thing where I just start crunching numbers, trying to do things, and I just took one of those pairs, and this one. Oh, there were 2 comets which were quite similar, expect for the inclination. Yeah, I remember, and I used my orbital software just to, those arcs are so short, quite a few hours. You can basically fit anything into it. I then tried to, based on the theory that those 2 comets could be similar, I was able to show that the can really be represented by one set of orbital elements. And then I had the eureka thing where I just thought, now let's check the other sporadic comets, if they can also be fitted with those set of elements. And interestingly, 4 additional ones were able to be fitted with it. And I very excitedly wrote to Brian Marston then and showed him my results, and I can't remember exactly, but at a certain point there came the IAU circular announcing the Meyer group, but also the Marston group, and I was a little bit mad, because why didn't I found the other one too? So Brian just did the obvious thing, just to check also the other pairs for any members. Yeah, so I was quite proud back then, which was quite a big thing. The only thing which is not so funny, the master group and later the Kracht group, they are quite interesting from a dynamical point of view, because they seem to be connected with the periodic comet Mackels, and a group of Meteors. And it has been shown that there's a transition in time with the orbits of those objects. And unfortunately, not much is known. So we don't know what was the original comet back. We have no brighter members like with the Kreutz group. I really don't hope that the Meyer mother or father will appear at some time. I guess it don't exist anymore. Yeah. So yeah, but it was really quite exciting. And as a maybe funny side note, there's a minor planet which was named in 2003 or 4, 2 years after the discovery of all those additional groups. Which is minor planet 3635, which is named after Heinrich Kreutz, the namesake of the Kreutz group. And the naming was made by Brian Marston, discoverer of the other group, and by me. And Brian Marston once called us the Comet groupies, which I found was quite yeah. Yeah, so again, it was exciting, and it shows, and this is what I think is quite interesting. There's still a lot to find. You just have to devote a little bit of time. You just have to try. You may fail quite a lot of times. I can't remember how often I think I have found something, yeah, and then in the end it was maybe a mistake from my side, or it didn't pan out because of some other things. But I think there's a lot to find, and there's even a younger generation now out there using tools. Sam Dean is a name which comes to my mind. And coming back to a question we had a few moments ago about the search for precovery images, SkyMorph doesn't exist anymore, so there are newer tools around, but it's not so much my thing anymore. I moved a little in time where you don't need those tools.
So, Mike, you mentioned Brian Marston. Can you tell us a little bit about working with Brian Marston on Comets?
Yeah, but what can I say? Brian is a hero for me. He was when I was young, when I started astronomy, because when you're interested in comet, you would come across his name at some point. Yeah, may it be that he was putting out the circulars back then, or that he wrote important papers. And coming back to the Kreutz group is very fascinating, because you know the comets are very bright and very big and so on. So Brian was a name big in there. And if you're interested in comet discovery or comet hunting, of course. And yeah, and when I started with the precovery work, then of course when you had something or found something, of course, since Brian and Dan, you were doing the IAU circulars, and Brian, I guess the responsibility for the Minor Planet Center back then, he was the person to approach if you have an idea. It was not so much formalized like it was today, so you could really send an email to him and asking and proposing something, or asking, could you check it? And the thing, what I liked about him the most was he was extremely responsive. He was listening, and you know, you were an amateur. He may never have heard something from my side before, yeah, and from my name, but he took the ideas, at least for me, earnestly. He tried to check it and even responded when I said something rubbish, and he explained to me why I said something rubbish. Yeah, so and this was very encouraging, really, to go on with this precursory things. Yeah, and he was even helping and suggesting and so on. Yeah, it was really fruitful, and yeah, and then. In 1999, Dan, Charles, I met you in Cambridge at the second, or was it the third, workshop of ICQ workshop in Cambridge. I met him for the first time. Yeah, and it was like meeting, when you're young, music or rock star or something, like he was for me something like this. Yeah, and you see it in person. It was great. By the way, back in Cambridge, this meeting was great in a way because there were so many comet discoverers also attending, which was also quite impressive. And there's a small occasion I want to mention, which shows quite well how Brian was. After I had found the Meyer group, and you might know the name Sebastian Hoenig, who is now professional astronomer in Southampton. He had discovered a comet also in 2002, the first visual discovery from Germany since 50 or 60 years. And Sebastian and I were friends, so we're often met and so on. And yeah, and Brian wanted, and there was a meeting. It was the Asteroid Comets Medius meeting in Berlin, in Germany. And Brian said he would come over and he would do a short presentation on the new comet groups. And he invited us to come. So Sebastian and I went by car to Berlin, to the hotel, and then went there. And remember, we went to lunch and something, and we could go with him. Yeah, we weren't professional scientists back then. I was working for a company. Sebastian was still a student, and we went with all those professional astronomers. And Brian was talking to us like to all others. But the biggest thing was when he did his presentation on the new comet groups, and Sebastian and I, we sat in the auditorium and listening to it. Brian said at the end of his talk, now I have a special honor. Today we have two very special young men here. One is Maik Meyer, who was the one who found the Meyer group I just presented. And we also have Sebastian Hoenig here, who just discovered a comet visually from Germany. And the whole auditorium was clapping, and we were sitting there flushing. And so this was Brian. And this... I won't forget it. This is why I'm so yeah. You see it. He yeah. I miss him really.
Yeah, we all miss him.
Yes,
Yep.
we do. Just a comment about Brian. I attended a Division of Planetary Science meeting, which is part of the American Astronomical Society, and Brian was there, of course. And he was like the queen bee with all these people around him all the time. And it was just fascinating to watch.
Yeah. And of course, Brian is very well known in the comet community for his catalog of cometary orbits, which he updated many times over decades. You, Mike, also have your own sort of catalog of comet discoveries, which you mentioned a little bit earlier. I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. Have you learned any interesting nuggets from your catalog of comet discoveries, and does anything stand out?
It was also a thing which was started a little bit based on the weather. I come back to the weather all the time. Yeah, it's based on a printed catalog which was published in the ICQ, and it was the catalog which Mike Rudenko did back then. And I was quite young then. I started to hack it into my very early computer I had. So I really hacked it into one by one, just typing it off from the printed version, and then tried to extend it. And what the catalog definitely did was to get me also start into digging into old literature, because I really wanted to double check the values there for discovery date or instrument, or where those information were missing. I just wanted to find out. So this was a little bit the start why I tried to dig into the literature. And so, of course, you then see many other things in literature, like missed comets, or yeah, and so on and so on. Also, of course, it was also my dream back then to have my name attached to a comet. Yeah, so many people saying, "Oh, you have attached your name to a comet group," but again, I would say a comet would be better. But yeah, this was a little bit the reason for the catalog. And I still maintain it, to be honest, just adding, but it has become much more complicated, to be honest, because when is a discovery or discovery? What is the original discovery date? When you see there's a comet, gets identified with even an designated object, which was seen as a minor planet back 10 years ago. What was the discovery of the comet? Was it when it was found as a comet, or was it? It's very complicated, and
it is complicated. Yeah, and of course you can get names at different apparitions, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. And this is happening more and more now with faint comets, because so many comets are found with the large surveys when they're 21st, 22nd, even 23rd magnitude. And a lot of these objects are never going to become very bright. They're distant objects. They're intrinsically faint and small. And yeah, it's the direction that things are going. I do want to just say something quickly here about Maik Rudenko, who's a good friend of mine and works at the Minor Planet Center now and does most of the comet stuff for the Minor Planet Center. Maik was living in Massachusetts then. In fact, he and I were roommates for a little while after college. And after Maik got married, even before he got married, he has been involved with Steve O'Mara, who some of you may know the name, in nova hunting, and Peter Collins. Peter Collins actually found a few novae visually. Well, Maik Rudenko got really interested in hunting for comets. Now, Massachusetts is probably as bad, if not worse, than Germany in terms of weather and light pollution here is horrible and all that. But Maik was very persistent. He got a refractor. I believe it was a 4 or 6 inch refractor, and it was portable, and he ended up discovering 3 comets from Massachusetts, which it's like, in Germany, it's like finding something in Massachusetts was like unheard of. And this was in the late 80s. And Maik was interested, like you were. There are a lot of similarities. In fact, we should interview Maik Rudenko at some point. But he was interested in this whole concept and what did other observers do? And he read a lot about how other visual discoverers were looking for comets, the Bill Bradfields and Bennett's and people like that. And he compiled that catalog that you mentioned, and we published it in the ICQ. I believe it was in 1987, a catalog of discoveries of comets. And those types of catalogs have unique information that are not available anywhere else, in terms of where the comets were in the sky, how far from the sun, that kind of thing. So what you're doing, your version is still available online, is it?
Yeah, I send it on request, because if I put it online, I think there's still quite a few errors in it, and I send it by request, send a disclaimer with it, but it's still up to date. I still update it, and yeah, too many projects running parallel.
Yes.
But when you maybe if I could add something, which is quite nice, because like Maik Rudenko and interested in how other comets were found, Don Mackholz also had a small catalog on a decade of comets, it was called. I said I started comet observing in 1987. which was still in East Germany. So the unification was 1990, and 1989 was this revolution thing. And I was at that time already interested in all those discoverers. And what I did was I was writing letters to a few of the bigger names. So I wrote letters to Don Mackles. I wrote letters to Bill Bradfield. From Bill Bradfield, I just knew his name, and I knew the place he was living, Dernancourt, which I had from the circulars, but I didn't have his address. The letter arrived, so nevertheless. But so I have quite a lot of letters, you know, those old airmail letters with blue and red stripes. I have those letters still here, where Don, Bill Bradfield, who did I also wrote? Howard Brewington, for instance. We had quite a little bit of mail exchange back then. And a few, David Levy also. I wrote to all of them, and I still have the letters from the end of the 80s in somewhere here, which is a quite nice touch, because, you know, who knows how to write letters nowadays? Yeah, so it's quite a nice thing. And I was asking the usual question: how long did you search? What tips can you give a young teenager how to do it, and so on and so on and so on.
So speaking of too many projects, the Comets mailing list, which has been going on for almost as long as I can remember. It's hard to remember a time when the Comet mailing list wasn't there. And pretty much anyone interested in comets, amateur, professional, is either on the Comets mailing list or at least knows of its existence. And it's such a great conduit for just sharing information back and forth about comets, and even being kind of that early warning system when something special happens. Usually you first hear about it on the Comet mailing list. How did it come about, and what's your perspective on its longevity and success over all these years?
Good question. I think what was a little bit lacking from my feeling in the early 2000s was some kind of central hub for comet observers to exchange data. You know, you have the local groups in Germany. We have the German comet observers, the English one in the US, and so on. But there wasn't a national one. And we had the Minor Planet mailing list, which was already quite a thing there. And I simply gave it a try. Just to set up a mailing list at Yahoo back then was an easy thing. I just sent out the address to my whole contacts back then. And well, apparently I filled a hole in some way, because a lot of people were joining, and especially when bright comets were around, it was flourishing. A lot of exchange of mails, and I think this was something which was quite well received in the community. And we had at some point over 2,000 members, but I guess more than a half were just members who joined when bright comets were around. You know, comets are a little bit like rock stars because they are big, nice, but when you only have faint comets around, there's not so much about it. But I have to admit, times go on, technology goes on. So, you know, we may be a little bit old-fashioned. There are new tools around, and information is spread over different sources or tools where you can access these. And I don't know if a mailing list is still a thing which is the best thing to disseminate information. For me, it's okay, but I have my doubts about the future, to be honest. This is not to say that the other tools are perfect. I really, I'm on the bird side, where I put some little bits and pieces, but it's not the same like the mailing list, because you have people who have the same interest, share the same interest, and you address exactly those people you want to address. for instance, I know there's a Facebook group, Dan. I think it's from you. I'm not sure, but I'm not on Facebook. Yeah, so I don't want to go. So yeah, that's a little bit the thing today, because it's spread all over, and I don't know. For instance, the German Comet group has some bulletin board like list, yeah, where you have to log in and you have all those messages and you have to click on those messages and read them. It's also not very convenient. Yeah, so I'm not really sure about the future. It's been quite quiet, more and more over only when a bright comet comes around. But it's okay. Yeah, only the important things are being.
Well, Mike, I'll tell you one of the reasons why it's probably more quiet on Comets ML is because on Facebook it's very active. So,
okay.
And the nice thing about our ICQ Comet Observations Facebook page is we are getting observations of most comets. Images are just posted there daily from people around the world. It's very amazing how it took off, and it's been less than 3 years. And we're doing something I started near the beginning of the pandemic and had no idea that it would take off like this. But in terms of your Comets ML group, what I like about it is I subscribe to your daily digest. So I get one email a day with the topics that are discussed the previous 24 hours. And then I can click on that if something interests me. If I see something that, a topic like an outburst of 29P or something, a comet that has just split or something like that I don't know about, I'll click on that and, get more information. So I still see Comets ML as a very useful thing, a tool where people post things that you might not see elsewhere. And I think, the more you have the ability to have people posting things, not everybody's going to post every place. And it helps. Of course, we all like to have a minimal number of places that we have to actually look to find information. But
well, I will say that one of the problems with Facebook is that there are too many comet groups on there. The ICQ is the best of the groups, but there has to be, 4 or 5 different groups or more on Facebook. So things do get diluted. The ICQ gets the best, I think, of the observers because of the history of the ICQ. But I like Comets ML, and that's something that I routinely look at. I don't always comment. I don't always, post there, but I look at it, I would say every day that I get messages. So I hope it keeps going because there's more information about comet brightness on Comets ML than there is, for instance, on the ICQ Facebook group generally. You get a lot more lists of observations and things. So I hope it doesn't go away. Let's put it that way.
And I'll also add that a lot of people are averse to Facebook. They don't like Facebook, and I know that. Yeah, Carl, Mike, Charles, none of you guys really like to use Facebook, and you're not at all alone. A lot of people are like that, and that's why you need to have other venues like Comets ML.
Yeah, sometimes I think if you would have some kind of central hub for comet observers internationally, I always take the example of the AAVSO for the variable service. It would be nice. I know it's quite complicated, but I don't know if it's only a thing in Germany. Less and less young people really go into a hobby and astronomy and do something like this. Yeah, the AAVSO, the members are paying for their membership, and I would have said 10 years or 20 years ago, would have also get enough paying members to set up something where one person can work on it. I'm not so sure about it nowadays, but
yeah, it's hard because the AVSO is losing income too. People aren't. They're losing younger people. And talk to anybody at a magazine like Sky and Telescope magazine, and you'll hear. I mean, already 20 years ago, they were really worried because they said, our average age is in their 50s, and where are all the young readers going to come from? And it's a problem.
Well, in fact, I was involved in something called the Riverside Telescope Makers Conference, which was held near Big Bear for many, actually 50 years, and it met its end just before the pandemic because there was lack of interest. The people coming went from a high of well over 2,000 to 200 at our last meeting. There just are not the young kids coming in, and we did everything we thought possible to bring interest and have families come in and whatever. It just didn't work. So, yeah, you were right. It's not only Germany.
And it's not only astronomy. You see it in so many areas where you have hobbies or something like groups of interest. Yeah. Okay, but it's a global phenomenon.
And light pollution doesn't help.
Definitely, yes.
Light pollution only gets worse, and I'm finding even in areas where we're putting in full cutoff lights to try to shield lighting, the light levels still go up in the sky. Yeah. The night sky becomes less and less accessible, other than by computer. So more people are just tuned into computers and less into actually going out and observing and being involved with groups, I think, unfortunately.
And it's always been the case that imagers, for instance, are much more interested in taking pretty pictures than they are actually in doing science. Even way back 50 years ago, that was the case. And it's now, of course, everything's just narrowing down. Mike, is there anything that we haven't asked you about involving your work on comets that you'd like to talk about?
There might be. I guess we could go on here for hours and hours talk about things. Maybe I just want to. Let me just say, I still haven't really put down the idea of having a comet named after me. So, Carl, you're the one. You have one. So, I remember in 1997, I was that much away from my comet discovery, and I would like to share this short story about it because it really shows that you don't even need to search for a comet to find one. Yeah. So it was, I think, 1997 J1. It was a comet found by Gene Muller, and it was discovered a few days ago. And I wanted to observe it, and I went out, and the comet was nicely placed, almost at the zenith, but the sky was not perfect for me, so a little bit of moisture. So, and I went out with my 10-inch reflector, and I had quite a hard time to see it. The comet was supposed to be about 12.5, around that. Yeah, so it was quite on the limit for me, and yeah, the moisture didn't help, but I saw it. So and I made an estimate, and it was a time where I didn't have internet at that time. I was a member in a mailbox or in a bulletin board system where you would have a modem, you would call in, the noise the modem was making when you dialed in, and you always had to watch for the price you have to pay for those times. And I loaded up my observation into the bulletin board. And on the next day, I just wanted to check whether others have observed it, because I wasn't so sure about about the observation, and I fell almost off my chair because there was a new circular. There was comet 1997 J2 Meunier Dupuy, which was found just a few arc minutes away from J1, and that. Yeah, in the end, today, I don't know which comet I have seen, because Meunier Dupuy was about half a magnitude brighter than J1. So, but I only saw one, so I still don't know. If I would have seen both, I might have had a chance. But yeah, so it was just, and I come back, it was the weather. It was always the weather.
It
Yeah,
only had a little more aperture.
Well,
That's all my near misses. I wish I just had another inch of aperture. I would have made that discovery.
Yeah, maybe.
Mike, don't feel too bad. John Bortle in the 70s missed a comet because he was sweeping with binoculars on a tripod, and he had to put the chimney of his house someplace, and he put it exactly where the new comet was, and he missed it because of that. So it happens.
Yeah.
Before I made my first comet discovery, I imaged or visually observed 2 other comets before they were officially announced, and did not recognize them as such, either because in the case of the film one, we didn't know what we were doing. The films were out of focus, so we didn't realize we had caught 1993A at the time, or A1 Mueller, a couple months before discovery. And I was looking for Skoroshchenko George in the spring of 1990, and I came across what eventually would be Chernus Kaiuchi Nakamura. And again, I had just gotten a 6-inch telescope. It was the first time using my uranometry atlas. I knew it was a comet, and then I turned around to look at my atlas. I hit the telescope with my butt. The telescope went moving over. I couldn't find it again. And then a few days later, I get the notice that, there was a comet there. When I looked at it, it had the same triangular shape as the thing I had seen only a week earlier. And I would have been 16. I mean, talk from New Jersey. I mean, that would have been awesome. And it would have been a visual discovery. I found 3, 1 photographically, 2 with a CCD, but they're not real because they weren't visual. That window is pretty much, I'm not going to say it's completely shut, but it's pretty close to being shut.
I like that way of terming it. They're not real because they're not real. I like that. But when was a comet ever discovered from New Jersey? Was one?
Yes. There was Thatcher. The Lyraid parent body was from Newark, New Jersey, and I believe there might have been another one from Newark. But I know Thatcher definitely was. But no, there were not many, considering Princeton's there and all that stuff.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of telescopes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, back in
I feel better now.
Now I have to bring out Gary's book to make sure when I said Thatcher, that really was.
Yeah, back in the 19th century.
That would have been 1861, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh no, it says New York, so maybe not.
Oh.
Either nothing's been discovered from New Jersey, but I don't know. Well, that's something to look at.
Mike, does your catalog of comet discoveries list location?
Only the nation, but not the exact location. I would also have to check this.
Yeah. Well, our nation, the United States, is so large, you could put a lot of other nations.
I know it's a little bit of pointless. This is why I then also added if they were available the MPC station codes, but they aren't available for the old historic observations, of course. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, there are, I believe, some codes that were assigned for visual observations going back, because there were a lot of observations in the 19th century, including of comets for which the astrometry is in the MPC database because Brian put them in there.
Yeah. For instance, if you have those, for instance, discovered at Paris Observatory, where Charles Messier or so, then of course I can use the station code there. But if you have really some amateur back then also observing somewhere you don't have a station code. And I don't want to use the most closest one because it wouldn't be correct because that could be a little bit of confusion.
Right. Okay, so that's been a very interesting interview, Mike. I thank you for your time and joining us. I hope that a lot of people find this interview interesting. We wanted to kick off our channel's first interview with a real splash, and we wanted to get somebody that we all really admire, and I'm very happy that we were able to get you to join us. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I hope it works well.